All right, we are now going to move along. Again, we're keeping up a clip here, and if you need to step away to, get a cup of coffee, walk the dog, go to the bathroom, or whatever, please feel free to do that. But I'm going to move right into our next presenter, Alex. Alex Tyndall Wiesendanger, who is also on our board of directors, New York State Council of Churches. He's probably one of the best people I know about helping congregations activate for social justice. He's the author of the book Seeds for Justice, and I'm going to commend to you a training that he's going to be doing beginning the first Monday in Lent. And please sign up for that. And the link for that is on our website. I'll also put that in the chat. So he's going to now help us learn how to talk to legislators and how to act on our faith in very specific and concrete ways. So Alex, turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's great to see everyone. I was really hoping we'd be together in person this year, but COVID had other plans. Nonetheless, it's a blessing to be with you all. So as Peter said, I want to spend some time with all of us on sort of the nuts and bolts of how we as people of faith meet with our elected representatives, how we move them to take action. Elizabeth, I just want to make sure you saw the message I sent you about the various technical issues we're gonna try here. We're gonna do a couple of things, and hopefully technology won't betray us. So hopefully everyone can now see my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you so much for whoever just said that. Makes me feel better. So as Peter said, my name is Alex Tyndall Wiesendanger. I'm a longtime faith-based and labor organizer, privileged to serve on the board of the Council of Churches. And today we're going to talk about legislative meetings and moving our representatives to action. So in kind of faith-based organizing terms, we often talk about this in terms of a power meeting, right? Which is a meeting with a decision maker, a legislator, or a person who has the power to enact the change that we're seeking. So how many people have been a part of this kind of meeting? And if I can't see you, because I can't see all of you, because there's so many of you, which is wonderful, please feel free to shout out. Let me see a quick show of hands. How many of you have been part of these kind of meetings? Excellent. Anyone want to give one or two reflections on what these meetings are like, or what elected officials are like when you meet with them? And I can't tell whose hands are up to answer that question and whose are just up regularly, so I'm going to invite you to rudely unmute yourself and just speak up.
This is Marty Swords-Harrell. I just, whenever I've met with any of the legislators in Albany, I've always been struck by remembering just before I go in there, I know much more about whatever I'm going to talk to them about than they do.
Nice. Camilla says usually they send a representative, they don't make it themselves. How many people have had that experience? That's a very normal one for everyday people, right, who are trying to move. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of tactics decision makers will use. And my thesis here is that most elected officials do not like to make firm commitments or take strong positions, right? They would like to agree nicely in general, but not commit. They are very comfortable asking you to make a yes/no commitment to them on election day, but they're very uncomfortable giving you a reciprocal commitment on the issues that are vital to our community. So Camilla already gave us a great example, right? One very classic tactic of decision makers is they send a representative. What are some of the other tactics decision makers may use to get out of having to give you a very clear yes or no as to whether they will take a stand or make the change that we know is essential for our communities and our congregations? And feel free to drop in the chat or unmute and speak.
Hijack the conversation.
Hijack the conversation. Yep, really good. I find them often to be patronizing, said Chris. Often, I find them almost exclusively to be patronizing. Yep, excellent, right? And they'll patronize you, which might include things like telling you don't know enough, right? We all agree in general, but it's more complicated than that, is kind of a favorite of electeds. Anything else? Say they'll study the issue, Reverend Miriam. Absolutely. You've never met such studious folks as elected representatives trying to get out of making a commitment to people in their districts. Yeah, that's a set of really good ones. So let me give a couple more here. I mean, one, they may just refuse to meet. It's always possible. They'll almost always tell us it's someone else's fault. Either it's someone else within the legislative process, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's the governor, it's the Senate, it's Joe Manchin. To be fair, it's mostly Joe Manchin's fault. But nonetheless, right, it's almost always someone else's fault. And then they'll tell us they can't do anything about it, right? This is really outside my hand. That's about the budget, or that's about this committee, that's about that committee. They'll tell us we aren't informed enough, right? Chris referred to this, right? They'll sort of say, well, you don't really understand. This interacts with this in a different way. There's something else going on here. And similarly, they'll be very nice, very, very nice, but tell us there's nothing they can do. They'll explain that it's more complicated. They love it to get more complicated. And they'll send a representative with no real authority. I was many years ago, longer and longer, I was an intern during my college years in the New York Assembly. And any meeting that the legislator didn't want, man, you better believe the college intern got sent, right? Because it was guaranteeing that you were not getting a serious commitment. And then someone said, hijack the meeting, right? Meet on their terms. And that's something that they really do. You know, we'll only meet with this many people. We'll meet in this. We'll discuss how it's going to be. We're going to take control of the meeting. So what are some of the things? And I'm really sorry. I tried to start printing something 20 minutes ago, and it's now printing. I'm poor with technology, so you may be hearing a lot of loud noise behind me. So what are some of the things we can do? What are some of the practices we can institute to make sure we have the most successful and effective power meetings we can?
Have prep meetings.
Have prep meetings, absolutely. Make sure we're prepared in advance. Have good data, Chris said. Yeah, it's important to know the issue. I'm also gonna talk a little bit about not falling into the expert trap. Right? One of the standard practices is to just say, go get more data, go get more data, go get more data. Now, I'm definitely not telling you to not know what you're talking about. I want to be really clear. Anyone who says, well, Alex says I don't need to know the bill number. I didn't say that. But one of the things eventually that legislators will do is just always have you go and hunting data until the deadline to move bills has passed. So what we want to do is we always want to move back to what we know. And that's those guiding principles that are at the core, that are in the documents we've talked about, and be able to say, I may not know the exact statistic on recidivism, but what I know is that retributive justice fundamentally doesn't work and violates our values. And that's why we support Bill XYZ, right? We always want to go back to our strength, which as people of faith is speaking to our values and the needs of our community. And yeah, Camilla's, yeah, absolutely know the bill number. Very embarrassing when you don't know the bill number you're coming to lobby on. Chris, it's a great point, right? Kind of trying to frame the issue in a way that matters to electeds. So let's talk through some of our best practices. Oh, I forgot this one, because this is the other thing. Have you ever noticed that every legislator claims they're not influenced by polling, and yet every legislator pays for polling? Something, so we should know something there, right? It means that this is just a flat out lie, but they're telling us nothing we do is going to move them or influence them. We know, in fact, that's not true, but literally every legislator, I don't look at polls, same legislator, I just spent $30,000 on a poll. All right, so when we go to meet, a couple of things that are really vital for us, right? Always have an agenda and always have a chair, right? We want to run the meeting. We've set it up. You know, if they want to run the meeting, they can call us and set a meeting and come to our church and they can be the chair, right? But for us, we come in with an agenda and a chairperson and we try to control the conversation. This one is actually hard for us sometimes, but make a clear yes or no ask. Right? Will you vote for, will you support, will you co-sponsor this bill? And then in less polite company, we say, right after you make the ask, what should you do? You're all doing it. That was great. You shut up. You don't say a word. You wait for them to answer. So many of us make a really good ask and say, will you co-sponsor? And then because we get uncomfortable in that silence, we start talking again. Wait and get an answer, right? Are you going to do this? Again, they ask you for a yes or no every 2 years. And it's only one. You do not get to choose that one rep represents you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on criminal justice issues, but another represents you Tuesday and Thursday on the budget. Like, we don't get to do that. So it's okay to ask them for a clear answer. And have a plan to responding for no that will move your campaign and your accountable relationship with them forward. You know, this doesn't mean throw the table over, set their office on fire, scream that they're going to hell and walk out. That's probably not the most effective strategy, but we do want to think about kind of what's next. Like, how are we going to move this person? If they say no, what is our response? What does that mean going back? How are we going to engage more people and change their minds? We already talked about this, like, know the facts, but don't fall into the expert trap, right? Reverend Swords Harrell already said this. You may know more about them, but I guarantee you they can come up with some esoteric question that you can't answer. It's a great strategy, right? Just like come up with the oddest, most intricate thing. And it's okay to say, I don't know that specific, but, right? Go back to the values and the key points. And I always think this is so vital. I am straight up plagiarizing this from a group I used to work with in training called Black Youth Project, BYP 100, that owned this and were fantastic organizers. And they said, we are the experts on our own experience, right? Like, no one gets to tell us what it means in their case, right? To be a young Black person in Chicago or in America. Like, we are the experts on this. Bring as many people into the room as possible. Now, this can be literally, right, pack the room, but it also can be figurative, right? You can think about, how do you make sure that you're speaking for all the people in your congregation? How do you share that at the beginning? How do you bring postcards in with you, right? Thinking about this puts more pressure on the elected to do the right thing, and that's a good thing. Always maintain unity in front of the decision maker, right? Do not start arguing with each other, correcting each other, disagreeing. Really effective legislators and negotiators will often kind of try to like wedge us. So it's really important that we have kind of a united front for what we value and care about when we're in front of an elected official. Oop. Before I get into the template agenda we're actually going to give you all to make this easier when you go set these meetings, any thoughts or questions about that? I'm just reading John's.
Yeah, John.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I've always said, and this only got truer after I had small kids, is like engaging with legislators like you would a small child or a puppy is absolutely useful. And that means lots of positive reinforcement when they do something even a little bit right? Like, thank you for meeting with us. It's great that you did that. Thank you for saying that people with criminal records aren't monsters. Great work. You made a tiny little step forward. It's really good to have positive reinforcement when we can avoid being adversarial, right? That's not our goal. Our goal isn't to be in good, accountable relationship where they know that they have to take what our congregations think seriously, but we want to be on good terms. Anyone else? Any?
Yeah,
Go
ask
ahead.
them if they, I always ask them if they read the bill. No. In the
Yep.
beginning. Have you had
Ask
an
if they've read the
opportunity?
bill is
Do
good.
you have
I
any
think
questions so far? Before I even
Yep.
start asking if they read the bill, if they have any questions.
I think that's a really good one. In our case, we're going to ask if they've read our legislative ask. It's impressive if they have. It's a hefty document, but it'd be good if they have, and we want to do that, start out there. And if they say yes, great. If they say no, gives us an opportunity to educate them. All right, so let's walk through, and you're going to get a Word version of this with some detailed points here. So that at the end of today or tomorrow, the end of this week, you'll get an email connecting you with a legislative captain from your area who's going to be setting meetings. And this is the meeting, by and large, then that you can run. You, of course, can vary. But for me, it's much easier, like, give me the script and then I'll figure the 10% change I want to make to it than just say, like, go meet with your elected. Yes, I can make these slides available, Peter, assuming that's okay.
Yeah, please.
And this is also being recorded, of course. So here's our template legislative meeting. Have someone open with prayer, as is appropriate, and give sort of the purpose of our meeting, right? We're here to establish a relationship with you as our elected representative between you and our congregations and the Council of Churches. Introduce yourselves. This is a good opportunity to think about how to bring more people into the room figuratively. I am from St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church on 142nd Street. We have, 300 parishioners who are all very concerned about social justice, right? I just put a lot more people in the room by saying that in my introduction. Introduce the council. We've been around since the 19th century, 8 denominational partners, more than 7,500 congregations are a part of those denominations. Right? And we're here to help people of faith act on their values in the public square. Introduce the legislative ask and kind of our key principles, and then ask if they received it and read it. To Neil's point earlier, right? Have you actually read this piece of paper that we shared with you? The odds are good that they'll say no, but that's fine, right? Like, we want to lay out our basic principles and ask if they've read these asks, and ask if they share those principles, right? It's a great way to start, is to build unity around principles, right? Do we think that when we approach legislation, we should always take the focus of how does this affect those who've been excluded most? How does this close the wealth gap between the wealthy and the rest of us? Do you share those principles? Great. Then no one is being asked to go through every bill that's in the legislative ask. The legislative ask is a tool for your congregations to look at a whole lot of policy. A meeting that would go through every bill would be an all-day summit with the elected official. And I'm not sure I have the stamina to put up with any elected official all day. So we're going to think about, an example, one bill that's really important, or a couple, right? Depending how big your group is, that you really want to focus on. This is also a great opportunity to check in with Peter and say, okay, we're meeting with Representative so-and-so. Is there a bill they really need to hear about that they haven't committed to yet, and it's really important? And then introduce that bill, share. Again, you're going to get, Peter, we didn't do this yet, right? The principles, you didn't go through that yet, right?
No,
Okay.
we didn't. I can top line those if you would
No,
like.
everyone's going to get them. I'm going to get us back on time. I'm going to finish at noon But you'll get these. So the basic principles around that set of issues, and I'll just give one example. It's sitting in front of me. So criminal justice, sort of the basic principles, and you'll get this, is all criminal justice reform policies should be based on the idea of restorative justice instead of revenge and perpetual punishment. We must recognize that communities of color are disproportionately incarcerated. We reject efforts to weaken bail reform and raise the age as a way to increase public safety. We think there are much better policy choices to make us safer. We also think more robust investment in our social safety net is a more effective approach to fighting crime than revenge-based and austerity-oriented policies, right? So we refer to that value. Then we share the key items about the legislation we're here to discuss, always include the bill number. And then we make a very clear ask, right? Will you support or will you co-sponsor this bill? And what do we do after we make that ask? I saw Marie say, wait, that's right. Wait and get an answer and then respond. If you want to repeat this for one or two additional bills, that's great. If there's one bill you want to talk about, that's fine too. At the end of the meeting, let's review our commitments. If you committed to get any information, review that. Did they commit to take any action? Or did they give you a date and time when they get back to you? Right? Make sure we've sort of memorialized that at the end of the meeting. And then, close in prayer as feels appropriate to you. And we'll move forward. Does that make sense as a template agenda, as I said?
Yeah, Alex, if I could just add one clarification. I think it's when you look at the general principles in the legislative ask, there are 7 or 8 that I've listed there, and one principle corresponds closely to the legislative area, like immigration, or you just mentioned criminal justice reform. So a good way to do this would be to start with that overarching principle at the beginning of the ask, and then whether it's environmental justice or immigration or whatever that is, as a preamble, and then focus more specifically on the bill you want to focus on, in that section.
Exactly. Any other questions or thoughts on this? All right, so we're going to practice. We're going to spotlight Chibuzi and Dahlia. Thank you for agreeing to this. And we're going to do we're going to do a shortened version of a legislative meeting. They're going to come and visit Representative Tyndall. I would not make anyone pronounce Wiesendanger. That's just too cruel. There's no reason to do that. And have a conversation. Following up, they've set this meeting. Dahlia is the legislative captain for the area. And Dahlia, there she is. And so we're going to sort of role play a very short version of this. And then we're going to give you all a chance in some breakout groups to do some debrief, as well as some thinking about how do we engage and be more powerful when we come into these meetings by actually engaging our full church. Does that sound good to everyone? All right, well, let's get started. And I'm turning into, when I'm really classy, I plan and put on a tie when I'm becoming the elected, but I forgot that today. It's too hot in my house. So you'll just have to imagine I have a tie on because I'm now Representative Tyndall. And you folks can take it away.
So glad to finally meet you this first time. With your permission, when, as you know, we're from the New York State Council of Churches, and when we gather together, the first thing we do is pray. So we're just going to have a few words in prayer. We come together today to discuss important issues that affect the lives of all New Yorkers. Open our hearts and minds to listen to each other and to always be guided by the principles of compassion and justice. Amen.
Amen.
Again, thank you so much for seeing us today. Perhaps the first thing we might do is introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Dahlia Herring. I live in your district, and the church that I go to, St. Vincent de Paul, is a large church also in your district, with a very strong social justice agenda.
Yeah, who's
I'm
the
a-
pastor over there now, Dahlia?
Oh, that's Pastor Hayes at this point.
Oh,
I
wonderful.
hope-
Tell him I said
hope-
hi.
Okay, I certainly will. And of course, you're always welcome to join us.
Great.
I'm also on the Peace and Justice Committee of that church. And for purposes of this meeting, I am chair of this little team. And Chibuzi, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Chibuzi Okorie I'm a lay minister of the Church of Gethsemane, a Presbyterian church community.
All right.
I'm glad to be with you today.
Yeah, it's great to see you all. Now, I don't have a ton of time. I think my staff already told you, but I'm thrilled to meet with you all. I may get called into session, so if I have to run, I apologize ahead of time. But someone with my staff will certainly follow up with you. So I just wanted to make sure we all knew that ahead of time.
Well, we certainly appreciate Representative Tyndale that you have met with us, and I'm sure that that we can get through our agenda in an appropriate amount of time and
All
have
right.
an interesting and robust discussion. It is, of course, true that, you know, as people of faith, we often come from different perspectives, and people of goodwill often have different points of view, and we do understand that. As members of the council, though, we're committed to a number of very basic principles, and I would just like to highlight a couple of them for you. One of the basic ones is that while charity, in other words, doing good works, direct service to people, like feeding the hungry and housing the poor, is very important, it is absolutely not sufficient. That we're called by our Lord, by our Creator, to do more than that, and that is to speak about the systems that are making people poor, to speak about injustices, and to be witnesses for people who are suffering because of those systemic injustices. We are, particularly in the Council of Churches, very focused on advocating for economic and racial justice. We believe that laws and policies and systems should focus very much on helping people who have been historically excluded, whether that's the Black and brown communities, immigrants, and other people. And we also are very concerned about the ever-growing gap in our economy, where the wealthy are getting wealthier and the low and middle income people are not getting wealthier, but often are getting poorer. Now, those were just a summary of our principles. Do you agree with those principles?
I mean, those sound really nice. You know, I am committed to doing what's best for every single one of my constituents. I think we've got to do the things that folks need to have what they need. And we also at the same time have to be really, you know, we are really good stewards, right? Really good stewards of tax dollars. I know when you know, tax day comes around, I hear a lot of folks in our district talking about their property tax bills. So I think we need to always be making sure people have what they need, but also, you know, not wasting people's money, because no one sent me here to just spend money that they would rather keep in their pockets.
And we really do understand that, but we also understand the great needs that people are facing right now. And we did send you a document, a legislative ask from the State Council of Churches. Did you get a chance to read any of that?
I'm not sure. Did we get a document from the council? I'm not sure, but if you'll send it over to my staff again, I will definitely look it over. I don't have it in front of me, which I usually do for these meetings, so I apologize.
Well, I really hope and encourage you to read it.
I've read it in past years. I know that do you all help write that?
We have been teams that have written that for this year.
It is,
and-
I remember from past years, it's a real, it was, you know, really neck and neck as to which was longer, that or my Bible. It was a real read. So I am so impressed and really congratulate you on all that work. So I will dig into it.
Well, thank you for reading it in past years. And indeed, it is a rather long tome, but we'd like to, in this meeting, highlight a few of our most important legislative
Of course.
asks. And Chibuzi, would you do that for us, please?
Yes, thank you for being here and thank you for listening to us today. I, as I said before, I work with the Church of Gethsemane, where we reach out to those in prison and those who have already been released and in need
That's
of
wonderful
assistance.
work. Thank you for that.
Yes, and I come here today on behalf of those in prison to ask you if you can co-sponsor the bill, fair and timely parole and elderly parole bill. If you can co-sponsor this bill, I'm saying this because I've been doing the ministry of reaching out to those in prison for many years now, and a lot of people have been denied parole because of the history of their crime. The parole boards are not looking at their rehabilitations. This is why we think it's fair this time for you to commit yourself in co-sponsoring these two bills so that it will help those who have spent a lot of time in prison to return back home and help the parole board to put into consideration on the rehabilitations of those who have already turned their lives around. So I am here today to ask you to, if you can help sponsor this bill.
What's the bill number? Do you know?
I don't have that bill number, and I know that the bill is fair and timely parole and elderly parole bill.
Okay. Who's the sponsor? Who's carrying it?
A lot of legislators are interested in this, and we want to put it. We want to, ask you to look into it and see if it can be in your interest to co-sponsor this bill.
How long do you think is the appropriate amount of time for someone to spend in prison? I mean, you probably saw in the news a little while ago, a little girl got shot and killed. How long do you think is appropriate for someone who's committed that kind of horrible act?
Well, why somebody is being sent to prisons is to be corrected. And a lot of people went to prison not knowing the consequences of what they do. We are not asking here that crime is good. Crime is not good to commit crime. But at the same time, when people do their time and they rehabilitated, they are human. They can be released and help them move along with their lives. I know there are some people who are supposed to do their time in prison, but when somebody spent 15 years and 20 years in prison, that person should be given time, and that person should be allowed to return to their community and invest in the community where they come from. And this will also save us money, the taxpayers, and this will also bring the families together and help to heal the injustice done to the victims and also to those who commit the crime.
All right.
So that is why
I'm sorry, I am getting called to session, but I will look at the bill. I really appreciate what you said. I am a believer, I'm a churchgoer, and I am a believer that people can turn their lives around. I would want to understand, what folks are we talking about? What are the crimes we're looking at? And what is the way that we're making sure that someone who comes out isn't going to do something horrendous again? Because I hear about that every day, but I also, I appreciate the work that you're doing. I commend you on it. It is a wonderful work to help folks. And I will absolutely, if you can get me that bill number, I will absolutely track it down. As I said, I am getting called to session, but if you will leave that information with my staff folks, we'll get right back to you. So thank you so much for coming to see us. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Excuse me. But you're sounding like right now you can't support the bill. Can we call you next week? to discuss this further and
Absolutely,
maybe
yeah.
you can make a commitment, and we will definitely make sure that your staff and you have the number of the bill and the bill itself, and any other kinds of questions that you have, please put in writing, and we will get that to you. And the other thing I would just like to say, firstly or secondly, thank you for meeting us. And
My pleasure. It's always great to see you.
meeting us, and we very much look forward to building this relationship, and in the future that we continue to speak to you on these important issues.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm called to session. Have to do the people's work, but it's wonderful to see you all. Congratulations on the great work. Give my best to the whole council, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to take off my tie. No longer Representative Tyndall. Thank
Well,
God.
you are quite something.
So
You're
for those
good.
of you
You're
who've,
good.
I think we
Good,
can take
Alex.
the spotlight off. Let's first round of applause for Chibuzi and Dahlia putting up with a tough pain in the rear legislator. Great work. So what we're gonna do now, for those of you who've done a lot of these meetings, I imagine that felt a little familiar. You know, I want to be really friendly, but you probably saw some of the tactics. So now we're going to go into some breakout rooms for just a few minutes because we're trying to catch up time. But in small groups of 4 or 5, Elizabeth is getting that set up right now. Thank you so much. Want to think about this, right? Like, why should your legislator meet with you? And in your breakout, discuss, because it'll just be more fun than a big room here, you know, what went well in that meeting, what could have been improved, how would the meeting have been different if the legislator knew that your whole congregation was behind you and ready to take action pending the outcome of the conversation. What are the ways you could have brought more people into the room, you know, figuratively at least? And how could you from here engage your congregation both before and after this meeting in this legislative process? So we're going to take just, you know, 5 to 8 minutes in our breakouts to do that, and then we'll come back for some closing reflections and thoughts. Does that sound good? I hope Dahlia and Chibuzi, you got to watch the chat. You got some real cheerleaders in there. So Elizabeth, if you would go ahead and open up the rooms, and everyone can go ahead and click yes. All right, welcome back. I think everyone is back. All right, before I reopen and the questions, any quick top line reflections or thoughts from your breakout discussions?
Alex, I just want to say I'm giving you about 10 more minutes here, so
Thank you. Yeah, I know we started late. I was going to try to get us back on schedule, but we're making up time. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, Faith, go ahead.
Yes, I just think that if this meeting had a few more people, it could have perhaps been a little more effective and impressed the legislature for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dahlia.
I really had a question about the prayer in the beginning. Frankly, I'll be just honest about it. I was really uncomfortable about doing that. You know, there's this whole thing about separation of church and state. I just wanted some comment on that from you.
Sure. I'll make a couple broad comments, but I'll first say, if you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. Completely sort of within your own context. There are many congregations I've worked with throughout my life that wouldn't be comfortable if we didn't move in prayer. You know, also it's always useful to make sure that you're not, you know, doing a very Jesus-centric prayer with a Islamic representative. You know, you want to be be sensitive to that. However, broadly, I think separation of church and state is mostly about protecting the church from being completely corrupted as a tool of the state, and bringing our values and our faith into the conversation, I think is useful for many. So it's a question of personal comfort. I'm not going to spend a lot of time right now because that could be like a full hour discussion, but I'll kind of go there. Yeah, Fred, unless this is a church and state thing.
That comment goes to some of the stuff we talked about. It really pays to do a little bit of research on the person you're going to meet. Find out if they've got a pet project in your hometown. Find out how long they've been serving, what committees they're on. So A, it keeps you from doing something dumb. And B, it gives you a couple of ways to try to get through the stone walls that they surround themselves with.
Yep. I like Chris's idea of asking if they'd be comfortable. It's a really good way to handle that. So other folks, how could that meeting have been more effective? How could you have brought more people into the room? How could you put a little more pressure on the legislator to feel like he had to answer, or that there was you want a legislator to feel like there's a little cost to saying no to you, right? Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, way to bring people in there. Like, you could talk about, well, my congregation has a couple committees and they've asked me to bring this to you. And, and what I do here, I've got like almost 100 volunteers, and I could bring them behind me saying, this is the consensus of my team. They keep bringing this to my office. How can we address this? What do I tell them?
Yeah, when you stop being one person and start being the face that's on top of 10 or 15 or 100, the meeting changes pretty significantly. Absolutely. Anyone else?
I forgot. Oh.
Yeah, Miss Gloria.
Yes, I was just thinking, Chris was with me. Well, I feel that you should do your research so you could act with certain questions, especially when he avoid the question, and to convince him how it's going to benefit his job or it's what he's doing. And doing your research, you will nail it because you know who you're talking to and you know how to form your words to make it powerful. You know what I'm saying? You're like selling it to him,
Yeah. Sumati, did I say that correctly? I apologize.
Sumati, yes, Sumati. It just felt like he was killing time by asking questions over and over again. What would be a way of controlling that strategy?
Yeah. So one, I think what Dahlia did at the end was fantastic, right? Refused to get away. Now, if you combine that with what Chris was talking about, that's where you get real power, where you say something like, I understand that you have limited time, but on Sunday, I have to stand up at announcement time and let everyone in my church know what you said about this, because we're all praying for this. We've all agreed that we want to hear about this. So can you give me an answer? Because my whole church in your district is waiting to hear. Everyone couldn't take time off work, but they all want to hear what you're doing. And now there's some pressure on the other side, right? Like, especially when we can actually say that. All right, Peter is telling me we're going to close in 3 minutes. So I am going to move us along with some final thoughts here. Maybe. So one thing that I think is I'll undergird all of this is that all the stuff we said about knowing your audience, knowing your research, those are all vital. But what's most important with any legislator is their first and last motivation is to keep their job. And that's about keeping people in their district happy with them. The most inarticulate meeting where your legislator knows 500 people are watching will go better than the most well-informed meeting that's only 3 people. So again, not saying don't know your research, but if we can think about moving our congregations with us, our meetings become a lot more powerful, right? So we're trying to build long-term and accountable relationships. One of the real strengths of congregations and congregational organizing is our congregations have been there and are going to be there, right? Many of us belong to a congregation that may have been founded 100 years ago. So they're long-term institutions in our communities. And in some of our communities are really the only ones that are standing up long-term for the needs of our folks. We can speak from our moral authority, right? And not fall into the expert trap. This is what is right. This is what we believe. For a lot of us, we get uncomfortable with a little tension, but remember that elected officials work for us, and it is our job to hold them accountable to the needs of the common good, what is happening in our communities. The more we engage our churches on the front and back ends, the more powerful we are, bringing in letters or postcards from your church to the meeting, having a follow-up plan where you say, I'm reporting back and my congregation wants to know where you stand, asking if they haven't gotten to yes yet, asking when they're going to come to the church and announce that they're not supporting the thing your church cares about are really good ways to move forward. So I'll leave you with that. Make sure Peter's going to give some instructions now to sign up for legislative meetings, reach out to your legislative captain, and then be thinking about how are you going to use the legislative ask as a tool to engage your congregation more. It's been great to spend this time with you. I will hand it back over to Peter as soon as I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Why can't I do it?
It's
There it
okay.
is. Sorry, I got it.
Right. So my parting word here to you is we are intentionally going to send you a follow-up piece of correspondence, probably as late as early next week, which will identify a captain that you can contact who will be arranging these meetings. And we have basically we're going to have a template of a couple Zoom links and a schedule that the captains will be able to fill in, and they'll be in touch with you. So in the meantime, we encourage you to, look at the legislative ask, and also this will all be recorded so you can go back and review stuff, and we'll give you some clear guidance by email. And also any questions at all that you can call me at 508-380-8289.